bit more about the objective communist class, what that is, how that's happening, what's different about that, what's making it happening today?
No, sure, I couldn't understand it. It was a little brat.
He's still a little brat.
I love you, Nelson. Love you.
Hey, George, you knew you were going to get nailed, didn't you?
Hey, we're talking about he's asking about the formation of a communist class. We call them a communist class because there isn't any way for them to eat except creating a communist foundation, right? I mean, that is to say a foundation to where the productive forces are aligned with the productive relations. And if I could take that out of a mumble jumble, to say that it's absolutely impossible today. I mean, how am I going to eat, for example? When I lived in during the Depression years, I lived in a little town, 1,800 people, there in southern Minnesota, and we got by. You know, I mean, you could I'm sorry. Well, we got by. I mean, you get a hunk of cabbage here and a potato there, and then, somebody give me a chicken over there, and exchange this and exchange that. I mean, we got by because the basic productive forces were so elementary and so backward that you could, with our productive relations, we could still live. And so here we had, during the Depression years, you had in America that was 70% on the farm, and they were able to get by. But today I live in Chicago, and it reminds me of a cartoon I saw back in 1936 in the Chicago Defender, black newspaper. And it didn't have any caption on it at all. It had this rat sitting on its haunches eating a rotten onion. And it said Chicago. In other words, if you lived in Chicago, you were in very serious trouble. People walking down the street with a salt shaker in their hand, right? You better not slow down. So I'm living down in Chicago. Nobody's going to give me a cabbage. Nobody's going to give me a chicken. Nobody's going to let me work on their farm, and give me a bushel of corn in order, to pay. Look, that's not going to happen no more. So today when we talk about a communist class, we're talking about a class of people who cannot survive unless they transfer the means of existence from the hands of a group of capitalists into the hands of society as a whole. Not that they think it out, but they realize right away, hey, something got to go, right? And so you see very elementary things happening, beginning to happen. People going into stores and loading up their carts and just simply leaving. And I remember not too long ago where people were organizing this, get 50, 60 people to go into these stores, load up their carts and just simply leave. And we're going to see food riots. We're going to see all this kind of stuff that are indications that people are beginning to understand I can't live without having access to the means of life. And that means to say I got to take that ownership out of your hands and place it in our collective hands, otherwise we can't live. And so when we talk about the development of a communist class, it's only what we're saying is that there's no way for them to survive, except by somehow or another collectivizing the basic means of existence.
Nelson, 2 points really, although they're interrelated. The first one is with regard to your sentence, communism is, and correct me if I paraphrase it incorrectly, communism refers to the productive relations. In other words, productive forces being in the hands of society rather than in private hands. And it has nothing to do with democracy. And I would like you to clarify that link, because obviously in order to attain social ownership over the means of production, there has to be a genuinely democratic participation of the masses in the formation of the political bodies that carry them to that attainment of state power in order to bring these privately owned means of production into the public hands. So please, just a little bit expound more clearly with regard to your statement that communism has nothing to do with democracy. Obviously, you were referring to an economic relationship as far as objective communism goes, as opposed to democracy being a political process involving the masses. And the second, well, I'll wait for you to do that. And then the second thing had to do with this new class. Go ahead.
Okay,
Oh, by the way, I also come from a family, I'm the fifth one born in a family of 10 kids, and we do speak a little bit more slowly.
okay. I can remember years ago, when I was arguing about this whole question, and I used to use Denmark and South Africa as examples. Both were capitalist countries. Denmark was heaven. I mean, it was womb to tomb security, right? I mean, total health care, guaranteed job for life, guaranteed college education, guaranteed burial with all the dignity. I mean, Denmark was a lovely place. Sweden was good. Norway was pretty good. They had exactly the productive relations as South Africa, which was a hellhole. So how do we comfort it? We comfort by history, by ideological development of the peoples there, so forth and so on. I can't guarantee anything that I don't know about all the different communist countries in the world, but certainly North Korea is quite a different country than Cuba. That's pretty clear, right? Because they have different histories, they have different concepts. I can remember the discussion at the end of the war between one of the British journalists and Stalin, where Stalin says, what has held back the Russian Revolution? We've never had democracy in Russia. Nobody knows what this is. So we hope within several years to be able to have a plurality of parties. But right now we can't do it. First of all, the people are not ready for it. They don't want it. And that was true. That Russia was never a democracy. I mean, one of the reasons you can have a Russian revolution, a communist revolution in Russia, is they simply transferred the land ownership from the Tsar to the state. And so, I mean, it was a very simple thing, right? There was no change taking place. And I can go on and on and on with this. So in America, what's going to happen? Well, the American people are pretty political. And we have a certain string of democratic thought in America. One of the reasons that I love this country, and I volunteered to fight for it, and I consider myself fighting for it today, is that it's the only country in the world that had a vision. No other country, I mean, America has done some horrible things, right? I mean, it's imperialism, it's slavery, and so forth and so on. But alongside of that, it presented to the world a vision. And this vision eventually is going to overcome that horror of slavery and genocide and destruction, that we've known. And so let's grasp, in America, let's grasp that vision. I mean, I used to get up in the morning and read that Declaration of Independence, and I say, man, this is a document. That preamble to the Declaration. Man, you read that thing and you say, God, this happened at a time when the world was shackled by kings and czars and dictators. That America is a different country. That we can talk democracy in America. I mean, real democracy. Now, at the same time, I'm not kidding. I'm not fooled by what's going on, right? If we had a vote today about whether or not to reestablish segregation, I think America would become a segregated country. I'm not kidding. I'm not fooled by any of this. If we waited for the soldiers to integrate the American army, it never would have been integrated. When I went to war, when I got overseas, the first person who shot at me was a soldier from the Dixie Division out in Mississippi, right? I shot back at the bastard too. I shoot it in America. No, so what I'm saying about American democracy, the possibility of American democracy, don't think for a minute I'm not aware of and scared to death of an America that is being pulled back towards that section of the roots, you know, of the genocide and the slavery in Iraq. And the worst part of it is that every tendency in America is becoming more exacerbated, right? Especially when you take in the African American movement. The greatest enemies of the African American people today are the African American leaders. Horrible. Horrible, but they always have been. But before we could control them. But now that they're totally integrated with the white ruling class, there's no way to control them. I mean, America is in serious trouble. But what we have to do is learn the art of grabbing what is positive, whether you're in Germany or Yugoslavia or North Korea or wherever. Grab what's positive and hang on to that and develop a program based on that. Because if we don't grasp and maintain and hold the moral high ground, there's no use talking about the political high ground. It doesn't mean anything. You first have to grab the moral high ground. We have that moral high ground. We're talking about the liberation of the American people. We're talking about bringing American democracy into the economy. We're talking about saving a country that we care for, that we love. And they're not. They're talking about oil. They're talking about Saudi Arabia. They're talking about all this other junk. So we have the moral high ground. We have to use it. But big propagandists, we have to get that message out there. We have to tell the American people, you got to take over your country. These bastards are taking the country away from you. They didn't realize that in the pre-Civil War period until they killed Elijah Lovejoy. And suddenly some of the propagandists begin to say, these slave owners are taking away our right to speak. We have to defend America from the Americans. But we have to do it.